Have you ever wanted to hear your voice on a podcast? Maybe have your own TED Talk or a YouTube video with hundreds of thousands of views. Ever wondered what makes some recordings or videos you listen to awesome and others not so great? My name is Christy Todd, and I help kids create original content. Today, we are going to work together to brainstorm your own unique podcast topic and create the beginning of your very own episode. Did you know that podcasting is rapidly becoming the communication tool of choice for people around the world? According to a survey by Infinite Dial, by the year 2022, there will be an estimated 125 million people listening to podcasts each month. And Forbes reports that 49% of these listeners are in the 12 to 34 age group range. So for all of the middle school and high school students watching, there are a lot of people your age out there listening to podcasts, wanting to hear from teens just like you. And guess what? Podcasts are big business, and it's still growing. At the end of 2020, Spotify announced they now have 2.2 million podcasts on their platform, a threefold increase from just 1 year earlier in 2019. So let's grow that number by even more, by you making your own unique podcast. So let's start out by finding something that you want to talk about. Take out a piece of paper and a pencil, or open a new Google Doc. I'm going to ask you 4 questions. Write down as many answers as you can to each question. We're going for quantity, not quality. There will be a timer on the screen counting down. Get ready, set, go. Question number 1. What is something that you enjoy doing? Write down as many ideas as you can. Question 2. What is something you know a lot about? Write down as many ideas as you can. And question 3. What is something you care deeply about? Write down as many ideas as you can. Question 4. Name a person or event that made an impact on the world. Write down as many ideas as you can. Awesome. Now I want you to look back over your list of ideas for potential podcast topics. So what would make a good topic? A great podcast will have a story that involves conflict and resolution. This would be an idea that you can build upon, where the storyline contains a struggle or a hardship that the person had to overcome. Through that struggle and resolution of the problem is where we learn something. And that is the something that you can share with your podcast listeners. So for example, let's say you wrote down volleyball as something you might enjoy doing. A conflict might be the time you had problems learning how to serve, and you had to work with a coach to learn the correct technique. That is a problem and a solution you could share with your audience, along with tips you could cover to help your listeners get better at serving a volleyball. Let's take another example. Maybe you wrote down an important person like Thomas Edison. Do some research. What struggles did Thomas Edison overcome? What achievements came as a result of it? What lessons are learned that you could share with an audience of kids your age? Now I want you to look back over your list and circle a topic that you want to use for your podcast. And jot down your ideas on what could be a main conflict and resolution that you could cover in your podcast. Some of you may need to do a quick Google search for ideas on your topic. I'm going to set the timer again, and let's take 2 minutes for you to determine your podcast topic, main conflict, and resolution. Our brainstorming time is up, And while your topic might not be perfect yet, and that's okay, I want you to commit to developing the idea during our workshop time today. Sometimes I think the hardest part of podcasting is getting started, recording those first few lines. So let's listen to a couple of podcast examples for inspiration. All three of the examples we listened to had something in common. They had a hook, an intro that made you want to listen. In one episode, we heard that the host was in love with a boy named Tyrone. But the real conflict and resolution in this story is about the host's grandmother, Sylvia, and her search for freedom, learning how to read at the age of 85. The second podcast introduced the conflict of a man's need to provide for his family and the dangers of his chosen occupation, coal mining. The host could have started off the podcast by stating facts, but instead he chose to amplify the impact of black lung disease by isolating audio of the guest struggling to breathe. And lastly, the third podcast featured a group of students producing a dramatic storytelling that used music and sound effects to introduce a conflict that happened on the battlefield of World War I. After introducing the overall podcast purpose and host, they then immediately dropped the listener right into the action on the battlefield. So why is that initial hook so important? Research shows that people make up their minds about if they like something or not within the first 7 seconds. So we need to make the very beginning of your podcast memorable. How can you start your story? What interesting perspective or hook will make people want to stay and hear the rest of your podcast?